Before we start, can you just give me like a brief introduction of who you are and what you do and things?
Yeah. My name is Lily Raabe. I use she, her pronouns. I am a theater director, facilitator, and community builder is how I like to frame it.
Um, how would you define the role of the director?
hmm well, I'm a pretty non-traditional director. So I'll start by saying that. I think when I typically think of a director or have thought of a director, I think of it as somebody who guides a creative process and has a vision for the creative process and then lays out that vision and has everyone help them implement it. So typically, especially in the theater, you're thinking of like a regional theater model where a artistic director of a theater company selects the scripts and lays out like the artistic vision and the artistic art for the entire season. And then they might direct a show, but they also contract or hire in directors to direct other scripts in the season. And so those directors are going to come in, they're going to read the script, they're going to create their own interpretation of the script, they're going to go to their designers and say, this is what I'm wanting. The designers are going to pitch back to them, they're going to give direction, they're going to direct the actors, and they're going to, paint this picture on stage. And that's, that to me is like a very traditional model. And that has never been particularly interesting to me. So for me as a director, I really love new works and I really love devising of new works. Other directors that I'm super inspired by are Auguste Boal, first and foremost. He is the father of Theater of the Oppressed, which is a form of theater focusing on using theater as a tool for revolution and social change, which
Mhm.
is right in my favorite soapbox of, what art can do. And it's a whole arsenal of creative exercises and tools that allow specifically non-actors to devise their own work and create theatrical performances that are a quote unquote a forum for revolution and things. So it creates plays that stop at the point of the climactic, like high energy moment of the play. And then you ask the audience, how would they want this to be solved? What do they think could happen? And rather than allowing them to just tell you, you actually bring them up on stage and they try it out. So whatever social problem you're trying to solve, if you're trying to solve a kid who is gay and his dad's going to kick him out, you would stop right at that moment of him being kicked out. And now you would bring on audience members to step in as that young man and to try different ways of solving the issues. And the goal behind Boal's work is that it creates opportunities for us to practice the really difficult things that might be going on either like interpersonally or in like our society so that we can be better prepared to shape
Mhm.
the world around us. And also it's like really cool process to be a part of. It's very interactive. I love creating interactive experiences for audiences so that you're not just sitting in the audience like watching, but you're also invited to participate in something that is meaningful. Another director I really love is Simon McBurney from a British company called Theatre Complicité. And that company is a devised company, and they create shows over multi-year arcs. And one thing that I love about what he says is that the text, like the written word, is only one element of the actual text of the show. The lighting, the sound, the movement, the visual art, whatever thing it is, every element of a show is actually part of the text and part of the story that is being told. And that's really important to me because, again, in that traditional model, you have a script and then you layer things on top of something that's already been written. But in Complicité's process, they're spending years creating and devising something that everything is being layered on together. So it fits and syncs up together really perfectly. Another director who I really love is a guy named Michael Road, who runs a company called Sojourn Theater. And it's kind of almost a blend between what Complicité does and what Boal does, because it's inspired by Theater of the Oppressed work, but it also is multi-year devising. But that work is done more so in communities to create really interesting shows around just various social issues. So, for example, I saw a show a couple years ago that he had done called How to End Poverty in 90 Minutes. And if you're an audience member, you enter the space. And first of all, there's all these different like infographics and things up on the wall. So you go around and you place yourself on a spectrum of like where you are when you're understanding poverty, and there's different questions that you respond to. And then all the audience sits down in like these little pods, and the show starts, and it's a series of scenes talking about poverty and different ways to end it, right? There's like systemic, like you need to go to your state legislature and pass new laws that are going to end poverty. There's also like really direct services, like, no, you should just go down on the ground and make sandwiches and hand them out to homeless people. There's all these different ways, there's different strategies to end the actual concept of poverty. And then as you're watching the scenes, at some point the actors break out, come in directly in front of your pod and start asking you questions. So now you have to have these conversations about it with other audience members who you've never met. And then you go back into the action of the play. And at the end of the play, there's $1,000 that's brought out and put on stage, and every member gets to vote for which kind of service they think is the best way to end poverty. And then it's all tallied up, and the winning service is selected, and they have a nonprofit that matches it, and you just made $1,000 donation to that kind of work. So it's a really cool, the whole thing is super fast paced, it's theatrical, it's community based, and it's super duper awesome. So I think in general, what unites all of them is that they really value process over product. And I think that's a really big part of what I love and believe in as a director, is that the process is more important even than the product. Especially, I think, because I love to work in community settings. I like to work in prisons. You know, whatever happens at the end is what happens. But did we build empathy? Did we build greater understanding? Did we surface some really incredible stories along the way? And if you've really had an amazing process, the product's pretty much always great. So I've never really seen a beautiful process result in a terrible product. But I have seen terrible process result in a terrible product for sure. And then I guess the last director I really love is a guy named Peter Brooks. And something that he says really resonates to me is that when you start a play, it is a formless hunch, is what he kind of calls it, or just like this big blob of clay. And you're looking at it and you're trying to figure out, what is it going to be? That's the story you're trying to tell. And so everybody comes in, all the actors, artists, other people, and everyone is just touching the clay and doing all of this thing and adding things into the formless hunch, this blob. And then once everyone's stuff has been put inside of it, the director's job is to start to edit and to whittle things back until the final form is revealed. But that there's like this real collaboration that happens where everyone's stuff is honored, and we just try it. That there's like a real power to being like, let's try that and let's throw it into the pot before we edit things out.
I see.
So that's also, I think, for me as the director, is sometimes I don't even like using the word director, and I use the word facilitator more, but then facilitator means that you don't have necessarily the creative ideas. People get confused. But for me, I want to facilitate a process with all the creative minds involved so that we can all be creative and we can all put things in. And then I'll start to whittle things back as we go. But I don't want anyone to be limited or to feel like because I'm the director that they shouldn't say something. Like, it's really important for me that everyone gets to say something and contribute. Because as soon as people are silenced, you know, what if like your actor who only has 2 lines actually has the best idea ever for how to like fix the scene, but you let your own ego get in the way of making the best art possible.
I can definitely see that.
So for me, like, I that's why I think for me, process and like, how do you share and balance the leadership, and like, you are guiding, you've been entrusted with this group of people that you're now going to guide on a process with you. And it's also complicated because you have power if you're the title of the director. So how do you break down or look at that power in a way that doesn't make people feel like trapped or silenced?
For you, how much influence does the director have over the finished product?
Really depends on what I'm creating. So, and that starts to become, you know, where for myself in a lot of ways of where I hold privilege and where I hold power. I'm white. That holds a lot of privilege in the United States. If I'm going to work I'm also often in the position of being the teacher, you know, so it depends. one thing I believe just in general, I'm going to throw this out there, is that I don't actually think art made with non-actors, whether those are youth or adults, is any less valid than art made with professional actors. So just across the board, I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to be very aware of the power that I hold and how that power could silence people in the room. So if I'm working, say, in the prison, I really take a step back and really try to let it be theirs. I try to do a similar thing-ish when I'm working like with YKA, where I want it to be what other people want it to be. That being said, when you have these training in this toolkit, I think it's also really important. Your job is to make sure that everyone feels good about the end product.
Right.
And so, you know, at some point, I think it's good to step in and be like, especially because, and also usually everyone else is on stage. So you're also the one who is actually sitting there watching it and looking at it all. So if you've done a good job of building an ensemble and building group, hopefully people will trust you enough that when you say, hey, just FYI, it will feel like you're doing it out of best intent to make them and their work really shine, as opposed to just trying to inflict your own opinion on top of it in a way that makes everyone kind of feel like, you know, kind of hackled and like defensive about it. And that again is more in like a community type of setting where you're really surfacing stories. And again, sometimes you're surfacing stories that aren't your story to tell. And so how much opinion should you have over a story that's not your own?
Right.
Point it becomes about aesthetic. You know, if I have a bunch of guys devising a new play about re-entry, but I'm trying to tell them exactly how to tell that story, there's a problem inherent in that, because I've never been incarcerated. I've never been a man who's been incarcerated. I've never gone through the re-entry process. Absolutely, it's not my story to tell. But I do know some things about timing and pacing. And so once they've actually gotten the story there, I'll help them shape it. But the story is going to originate from them. When I work off of a script, I think it's a little bit different. When I'm in a process where I've been handed a script and now I have to go somewhere with it, I do tend to come in with more of a specific idea around it. Also, a lot of times that's what trained actors need and want from you as a director, is for you to come in and to have a vision and to be clear. And that does create a sense of safety and security for them. So if you can find that balance between giving them what they need as an actor, because they are meeting a director, but also potentially working with them enough that they start to dig into their own artistry, that's ideal. But at some point in some processes, there's certainly a moment where you need to have a unifying vision and a clear direction that everybody can then run with and move down. So I have a hard time answering that question because it depends on where I am working and with who and what the power dynamic is and what the people themselves need that I'm working with as a director. So that's a convoluted answer, but I do find that people who are trained like 4 years, they've been an actor, most acting training is quite traditional. And so they are coached to think that they're just going to show up with a script and the director is going to tell them pretty much everything that they need, every piece of blocking, all of those different kinds of things. And when you're working with those actors, sometimes you just need to give them what they need to be comfortable. There's also stuff I think you can explore. So I use a lot of this kind of movement work called viewpoints. And viewpoints, basically, you have like a grid on the floor and everyone's moving on the grid, and you play with tempo and proximity and shape and all of this like imagistic work that's movement based. And at some point you have everyone inhabit their actual characters. So now they're moving in this metaphorical, physical way, but in their character, and you can start to have people interact with each other once they get really into that work, and you find really cool physical interactions. So a lot of times I'll do a lot of that with an ensemble and use the organic physical interactions that we create between the characters to start to inform the blocking. So even then it comes from them, and then I'm picking and choosing what they've created to actually put inside of the play. So that's kind of like a hybrid thing where it's still coming from them and what their actual spirit is, but then I'm editing, right? And I'm picking and choosing the things that they've created that are going to work the best over here, or we're going to recreate that image over here. So when I can, I try to work in a hybrid way, but also honoring, you have to really meet people where they're at. I think that's a key thing. And then know how to work with people where they're at to get what you want out of it.
That is, I like that. I like that. Meet people where they're at. Yeah. Okay. Can you give me an example of something that leapt from your mind and found its way on stage?
Something that leapt from my mind and found its way on stage. I think so. Not a couple years ago, but when I was living in New York, we did a play called Eaten Voices, which is this really beautiful play written by one of my friends. It's about a little girl, and she's traveling through night towards day. And night is a metaphor for her subconscious mind, and day is a metaphor for the conscious world. And she's been driven into her unconscious mind because of some sort of physical and or sexual abuse from a like lurking male figure in her life. But along the way, she meets all of these different like spirit guides and characters who are helping her travel through, like she meets a moth that's guiding her towards the day and all of those kind of things. And I think in the concept of that world, that was a world where I think I had a very clear vision of what I wanted the aesthetic to be. I really wanted it to have this like Guillermo del Toro dark fairy tale kind of energy. And we created that in a variety of ways. We had a very like simplistic set, but we created just one spotlight that was basically the lighting for the whole thing, but the spotlight was like a casting of a moon down onto the stage. We created basically, I love staging things in the round. That's one of my favorite ways to work, especially with movement, because you can have people just moving through the audience, moving through the space. And I felt like we were in a forest. We was in New York, so as you know, there's not a lot of forests, but I went to a graveyard and like salvaged all of these trees out of a graveyard. Experience. You also know Ahmed. So Ahmed and I salvaged trees out of a graveyard, and then we're like carrying them through the streets of Brooklyn. But we created all of these trees that we planted throughout the space and put lights at the bottom, so it added a little bit more light and glow throughout. And I think that was a very cool, just of like creating this environment that I had in mind. And then with that show, it had a lot of masks, and we did a lot of movement-based work with it, so that really just, by the time audience was sitting in it, it just felt like a woodland that creatures were just scuttering and skittering and dancing through. And I think it was a cool example of, we trees from a graveyard and just one light in a round circle and some twinkle lights wrapped around bases of trees with like different fabrics. And it was a really incredible, like beautiful set. I'm not just saying that, it was really, really pretty. And it cost, I think like $30 to make it. So it was cool because I think that was one of the examples where I took more of a directorial, like, this is what I want it to look like. But it was also cool because it didn't cost much.
Yeah.
I think a lot of really great stuff can happen without a large budget also. So that's an example, I suppose.
Yeah, that is an awesome example. Where did you get that idea? Did it just come up to you, like to wrap everything?
She was traveling through the forest, and I wanted it to, at the time I was really into the idea of found objects, so like things that you find and then you repurpose them into either props or stage stuff. So I wanted to create like a found forest. I wanted it to be real trees, not like cardboard trees. I just felt like something about having real branches and wood and stuff was going to be better. And then the moon, the whole show is, people twirling around saying moon, moon, moon. So it wasn't really that hard. It was just very clear that the moon was super duper important. So
I see. That is awesome. Freaking what, $30 for what's
right?
more aesthetically pleasing? That is awesome. My next question, how did you get started and what drove you?
I really got started when I was 13. I lived in a really, really rural community in Eastern Oregon, and we had a little school across the street. I was homeschooled, but the school across the street had about 20 students, give or take, grades K through 6. And when I was 13, they asked if I would come and start teaching a music program. And being 13 and stupid, I was like, of course I can do that and build my own curriculum for multiple grade levels. So I did, and we started doing a lot of musicals. And I did it all the way from 8th grade to high school till I graduated, 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, all school year. It was like a lot. And we started doing like musicals and adaptations, and it was this really incredible experience. And I was simultaneously going to high school theater, and, drama club president, the biggest of nerds, improv club president, even though we didn't have that big of a department, but I started an improv club because, we needed one. And I think just in all of that, as someone who I grew up on a school bus, which is a fun thing. My parents are very like nomadic type of people. And so we didn't really settle down until I was older. I had never really had a sense. And then my parents are also very liberal and very progressive, and rural Eastern Oregon is not. It's extremely conservative, Republican, a little bit ignorant,
Yeah.
right? And so when we moved there when I was younger, I never fit in and I never had friends. And so high school theater for me was the first time that I actually had friends or a sense of community in my entire life. And I think at the heart of it for me, like making art and all of those things are great. But to me, the theater has been where I've found a sense of community and family. And I've seen a lot of other people have the same experience, where that's where their like lifelong friendships and relationships and things come from. And theater people are just my people. And that's always been a truth for me. And it's always been the community that I feel like I fit into, even though I don't really feel like I have another community. The theater is a place for me that feels like safe and warm and all of that stuff. So the main thing, honestly, that drives me is a sense of community that comes from this art form. And it is a really communal art form because you can't put on a play without a bunch of people. Like,
right.
Even if you're a solo performance artist, if you're actually going to perform, you still need a stage manager and someone to run your lights. And like, it's literally impossible to stage theatrical production as a one-person act.
Yeah.
So it's a really communal art form. And that's what I love about it. And I love building community using theater. That's like the underneath it all kind of root. And also I think, if young people go on to become artists, that's awesome. But watching how people, and not just young people, I mean, also guys in the prison, right, who are full grown adults, just like watching people uncover their own stories, get better at talking about their own stories, become more confident in how they express themselves, like the life skills that theater teaches people are pretty astronomical. So I love watching people go on their own growth journey using theater as like a way that helps them do it. It's really powerful. Like even just, this is a story that I love to tell, but when I was working in the prison like 2 years ago, we did this 5-month devising process that was, we're going to create a new play on the topic of American violence and where it comes from. Chosen by them, not by me. And I think they selected it because the night that we were choosing what we wanted to talk about, it was the night of like a big shooting that had happened. And so it was on everybody's mind. And it was a really beautiful process. As I said, it took like 5 months. And we ended up creating a play that had nothing to do with physical violence, because what they ultimately unearthed was that no physical violence happens in the world without there being some sort of psychological, emotional, or spiritual violence happening first. The violence starts in one of those 3 places. And for me, that was like a really profound thing, right? Because when I actually do track it, I'm like, yeah, maybe there's like just some drunk person, but like generally it doesn't, violence is always sparked by one of these other things happening first to somebody. It helped me really understand them. It helped me understand humans. But there was a guy who went through the process with us who was really, really, really into it. They got maybe like 15 guys who ended up in that play were super bonded together by the end of it. And in our final debrief after the performance, the guy, this guy was sitting there, he's a white guy, and he's like, I've been locked up here for 30 years. He's like, I have over 25 white supremacist tattoos on my body. And he's like, in the past, years that I've been here, he's like, I have never spoken to anybody who's not white. He's like, but because I took this process and, you made me touch, and he's like, I have friends now who are Black and Latino. And he's like, Victor and I, we hug every day when we see each other. He's like, I've never had a friend outside of my own race until this.
Wow.
Right. And, so like, to me, like making the art is really beautiful, but when you can make someone have a better understanding of what it means to be human because they've used the art, that's the really good stuff, in my opinion.
So what is the most difficult part of being a director?
The most difficult part is that ultimately there's a lot of personalities to contend with, and you as a director have to contend with them all. There's always in every cast one diva who takes a lot of your energy, who requires a lot of after rehearsal phone calls. There's, just like a whole lot of different things. And maybe it's also, I'm speaking somewhat too, because I've done a lot of self-producing of work where I want to do a project. So we're also going to produce it. So it's also not just the work of showing up in the room and directing, which is great if you can just get a paid job or you do nothing but show up in the room and direct. But, a lot of the time you're also working in a self-producing capacity as well. So maybe it's a little off topic, but unless you're really, really, really lucky, you're going to be self-producing a lot of the work that you direct, and kind of being everything all the time gets really exhausting sometimes, and can feel really overwhelming to be, doing your own marketing, your own partnership development and relationship building, managing your own auditions. Like, it can just be a lot to do it all. So I think in a world where you're just walking into the room and you're getting paid and all you have to do is interpret the script, it's probably, for me, just comes down to like managing all the personalities and making sure that everyone is good and like expending that emotional energy. But I think for me, a lot of projects I've done, I've also been a producer. And it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.